Welcome to the Mad Ones. I'm your extremely good-looking host, Cam Harless, and I don't have a guest co-host today because two dudes that I would make my guest co-host are the guests for this episode, and I think that that's a worthwhile episode, and I don't need anyone else, do I? Do I? Yeah, I probably do. But I'm very stoked about tonight's topic and my guests because we're going to go over a little bit of what we did last week, but it's going to be a little deeper. We're going to talk about spiritual warfare on the ground, compare notes. We're going to talk about demons and demonology, all sorts of stuff, and how much more powerful Jesus is than any of those little demon jerks. But before we do that, I do want to remind you that this show is 100% brought to you by fans and patrons. So if it wasn't for you, this wouldn't be happening. I wouldn't be doing this. But if you'd like to help this show along, if you'd like to help me out, you can go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and share the show with your friends. This is episode 165. There are hopefully at least 165 topics that we've gone over in some level of depth and detail. And there's someone out there that that needs to hear about one of them or needs to hear a perspective from one of them. So share that episode with your friends. That's like the last little bit that we need to do before we get monetized on YouTube is just watch hours. So if you could share this, watch whole episodes, go back into the YouTube archives and watch another one, please do so. It'll help a lot. Also, if you want to be like the man, or the woman, if you want to be like my favorite people, you can go to patreon.com/themadOnes. You can join our Patreon there. There you will get extended episodes. So this episode will be an hour for most people. But if you're a patron or if you're a Rockfin subscriber to us, you will get an extended episode, which can go 30 minutes, an hour longer. Depends on how good the conversation is. So hopefully these guests are interesting enough for like a long conversation. We'll see. But if you go to patreon.com/themadOnes, you can join that. And also, if you would like to, really rep the show in real life, you can go to wearethemadOnes.com/store, pick up any of the shirts, and you'll be able to look like you're the biggest fan of some band called the Mad Ones that people will ask, I've never heard them. Who are they? And you'll go, oh, no. It's some chubby bearded dude that talks on a microphone once a week. And I just kind of like him a little bit. So do that. wearethemadOnes.com/store. But beyond that, that's all the pitches. That's all the things I have to ask of you. That's it. So joining me today are two of my friends who are kind of demon experts in one way or another. We talked to the first guest that I'm going to bring on, Scott Johnson, a little over a year ago about his work in exorcisms, which is a dying art. It seems you only typically see it on major motion pictures. But we talked to him before, and we're going to go back into some of that again. But one of our listeners, when our next guest, Izzy, who is a demonologist and paranormal researcher, came on the show, I got a DM saying, hey, what does Izzy think of Scott Johnson? I don't know if you know who that is. And I was like, I know who Scott Johnson is. He's my buddy. We became friends a year and a half ago. We're buddies. We don't talk enough, but we're buddies. And yeah, you know of him because of me. So yeah, why don't I just bring these two together, compare notes, talk about their work and what they do, and get to it. So joining me now is Scott Johnson, the exorcist from Ohio, and Izzy, the demonologist and paranormal researcher who is in one of the Carolinas. I can't remember which, and I don't know if he wants me to be more specific than that. Welcome to the show, guys.
What's up?
What's going on?
How have you been? It's like what's so funny is when the person mentioned that to me, Scott, I was like, I feel like a bad friend because I don't think we've spoken much since then. And I'm like, I told him I wanted to. And then, am I a liar? I don't want to be a liar. So here you are. We're going to be friendlier again, I think.
It's a two-way street, my man.
Hey, I respect that response. I do. How are you doing since last week, Izzy?
Oh, yeah. Doing great, man.
It looks like you got rid of the volume bar.
Yeah, it was a setting in my camera I had to fiddle around with.
That's great. Last week there was this little artifact in the bottom of his screen that was showing how loudly he was speaking the whole time, and I was like, it's not bad, but it was nice to see that his levels were good.
Well, I've got a wobbly table, so
I can do that too. But I also have it set up. I have it set up in my thing so that like if my table wobbles, it tries to stabilize. So
mine definitely
doesn't
doesn't
show that much. So iPhone.
Yeah, this is my stabilizer right here. If anything falls, I just go catch it.
So let's. I'm not sure. One of the things I wanted to bring up before we got into the main discussion is one of my favorite listeners, who goes by Soldier of Pacifism on Twitter, sent a message about last week's episode. I just wanted to read it and maybe use that as a jumping off point. But he said, thank you, Cam. That was a really great episode. I appreciate you sharing it with me. Did I ever tell you about my demonic encounter when I was a kid? I don't know if he wants me to share all this. I'm sorry if you don't. But it was the night I felt two of the most intense opposite feelings. My mother had lived in a haunted house when she was young. She never saw anything, but there was one room in particular that brought on strong feelings of fear. She said she was scared to sleep at night, and everyone in her family felt it. She taught me that ghosts are demons, and that if you call on the name of Jesus, they will flee, but she didn't know that as a child. Anyway, in primary school, I would have been 12 or 13. We went on a trip to Morton Island. It was quite fun, tobogganing down sand dunes and exploring the island. Then students started to talk about seeing a ghost. I didn't know if they were making it up, but I told a friend of mine what my mother had told me. One night, I woke up, opened my eyes, and saw the face of a girl floating above me. The room felt cold, and there was an intense fear, not in reaction to what I saw, but in spite of it. While it was pressed into me, I immediately closed my eyes and started singing. It's kind of weird in hindsight, but I was singing about how Satan has been defeated at the cross and has no power over me. Obviously, I don't remember the specifics. The fear left and was replaced by peace and a feeling of love. I felt emotionally like God was hugging me. I got out of bed and went outside into the night. I wasn't afraid of the dark at all. It was insane. I know we encounter spiritual forces on a regular basis and can't see them. I actually think that for me, those are much more dangerous. I believe lies that I think are coming from me. They're crafty. One thing that has bothered me was the question of why it appeared to me. There were about 3 other people in the room who stayed asleep. I just don't know. So let's use that as a jumping off point. I want to know what I want to know, Scott, what are your thoughts of that story? What does that conjure up?
Like the specific question at the end there? Is that
sure? I mean, you can start there, or what you think of the whole situation. I'm just using this as a diving board to dive into the conversation.
I mean, from my experience, which is purely anecdotal, I'm not like an expert in anything. This seems pretty common, but some people are more susceptible to the spiritual realm than other people are. And I think that's kind of maybe what you have going on there. But I mean, there was knowing her mom said the house was haunted. I kind of tend to agree with the mom that they're not ghosts, they're demons.
Right.
Because I think the scripture says the Bible appoints one man to die once and then face the judgment. That's my terrible paraphrase. I'm sorry.
You're good.
But it's pretty common. The methodology. Usually, people that have these experiences find that if they do worship music or sing like a hymn or pray or things like that, they can be delivered, because ultimately, I think this is kind of how a demon tries to begin to attack somebody, right? Like they're trying to get a foothold. This person rejected that, so I think that's a good thing. But this person may be a little more sensitive.
Yeah. I know that when I know that when it probably came from really the extended portion of the episode last week that he listened to, because I talked about an experience I had with a and Izzy talked about a couple experiences he had too, but I had an experience with, sleep paralysis that was very specific. I won't go into it all over again, but it was very specific to me in my situation. And it wasn't just like some anonymous, bland, plain demonic presence. It was like trying to threaten me or tell me that it had power. And I was just like, say in the name of Jesus. Name of Jesus, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. So I think that's where that stemmed from, that him asking that. But yeah, that's one of those. I think that and I'll go into this, and I want to hear Izzy's thoughts as well. But I think that when it comes to why some people see things, is honestly, I think that there's some sensitivity, but I also think that there are some people who have some sort of history, or have um, a strength where they know, like they know to sing these songs, right? They know to use the name of Jesus. They have that some foundation to combat this, and
Mm-hmm.
the Satan doesn't like that, and I think he likes to flex on people, and or at least make them take them to the point where they think that he has power that he doesn't, right?
Absolutely.
And so, and I talked to Izzy. Izzy has a little different take on ghosts, I think, than I would, but we're very similar. I think that we're just talking. I think our splitting of hairs is like our theories of time, so it gets very deep. But yeah, no, I think one of the things that happened with my story was that was the enemy trying to impress upon me his power, and I was like, you tried. But what do you think about that, Izzy? I know you had a chance to read that earlier.
I thought it was fascinating, and a lot of that resonated with me, especially the sleep paralysis. I didn't have sleep paralysis per se for me at any point, but I know my wife did, and she would commonly astral project when she was still a practicing witch. And
I
I
didn't know
told
about the
you,
witch part. You didn't tell me the witch part. You
did I
just told me that
not?
she astral
Yeah,
projected.
she was Wiccan when we first met,
Nice.
and the last time I shared with you
Sarcastic
that
nice.
last. What's that?
Sarcastic nice is what
Oh,
I said. Nice. It was sarcasm.
well, that last time that she had astral projected that I shared with you last
Yeah,
week, she was a Christian at that point.
right.
And that was when the demon was actually like on her. She could see her unconscious body, and it was on her trying to find a way in. She
Right.
said it was doing something, and it was the first time she had actually rebuked something evil in the name of Jesus. And she was a little bit like taken back by how quickly it fled. But yeah,
It's incredible to me how many people have these situations. I remember when I was a kid, like I would have told you, I mean, I don't know what it was now. Like, I mean, it may have been what I thought it was when I was a kid. Um, but I swore up and down when I was a kid that I'd seen an angel. And and I'll tell you, it's a very small story. I was a kid. I don't have a lot of very specific memories of it, but I was laying down in bed, and it was thundering and lightning, and I was terrified. I'm pretty sure I was in my mom's bed, and I was scared of the thunder and lightning. It's a kid. And I remember I started praying, which I should also remind me in the after show to tell you about my first crisis of faith that I ever had, because that one I think that's part of my testimony, and like I have to tell that story in order to tell my testimony. But we'll do that in the after show. But I remember I was laying in bed and I prayed and I was like, God, I'm scared. And then I looked up and there was just this being of pure light standing there for like maybe 20 seconds. And I felt calm. I felt okay. And I went to sleep. And that was the whole thing. And I would have told you, like right now, I don't know what that was. I mean, it could have been, but like as a kid, I was like, that was an angel. And I think, I don't know. I've not thought about that in probably 20 years. So there's a memory scraping from the bottom of my memory barrel for you guys.
Nice.
I know that there's both of y'all are in the kind of demonologist. Scott does exorcisms. You do paranormal research, and you've dealt with demonology, Izzy. But you both come from very different backgrounds, which I think is really kind of one of the more interesting things about this conversation, because when Scott, he was in. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. You
You're
learned.
wrong.
Thank you. If I remember correctly, you learned the ins and outs of exorcism by studying under an Orthodox priest who was once Catholic. Am I remembering that correctly?
Correctamundo.
So a lot of your experience has to do within that realm that people have seen in Hollywood movies. Whereas Izzy, I mean, he did the paranormal research thing, but a lot of his demonology and things like that are along the lines of Michael Heiser's Deuteronomy 32 worldview and the powers and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a different look at two different looks at the same thing. And so I'm like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the differences. I want to see where the agreements are, the disagreements. I want to see all of it. So let's compare notes, dudes.
He's trying to bait us into a fight, bro.
No. Actually, I'll go ahead and say that I'm Orthodox leaning myself. I'm not a part of the Orthodox Church because I do have a few hangups, but theologically speaking, I would consider myself like 90% of the way there, maybe 88%. But yeah, I lean very heavy that direction. So, and by the way, Cam, Zach does too. When he introduced me to the Orthodox Church, it was very fascinating to me because there were a lot of things that I was looking for that I wasn't finding in the evangelical church. And some of the disdain that I had, some of the problems major hangups, I should say, rather, with the evangelical model. I was never able to put my finger on it. But when Zach was able to break things down for me and say, people go to seminary, they learn these things, and they don't talk about them. And I was just like, we should be talking about church history.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things that's like I don't know if the world knows this right now, but this week, Monday, I started my master's degree with Zach. Same masters we're going for in apologetics and cosmogony. So for me, it's going to be a stepping stone, I believe, into like ancient Semitic languages or something. I don't know yet. I'll figure that out as I go. But that is one of those things that like I know I've sat in church services and I've been like, why are you not talking about these things that I learned first year in not even seminary, a Christian college? Like, why are we skipping over certain things? What's the deal with this? But what's funny about that is he did learn in that way. But Scott, you are Church of Christ.
It's non-denominational, yeah. I mean, it's in the evangelical world,
right?
So,
well, that's what's funny is because I'm like just a nomad, like Izzy. I have some hangups on orthodoxy. I have hangups on like almost every denomination, if I'm being honest. I'm just kind of a nomad trying to search for the truth and try to find Jesus in the word and in tradition, as long as it doesn't, not some traditions just don't make any daggum sense. And I'm just not going to agree with those.
Right.
Because I mean, some of those traditions come from this one dude that I'm not a huge fan of, that I got in a big old fight with a bunch of Catholics on Twitter about the other day. You have a shirt about him, Izzy?
Huh?
I said, you have a shirt about the guy I argued with Catholics about the other day.
Oh,
yep.
This?
Yeah.
That guy. I made this. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is called Cancel Augustine.
Issues with Augustine. I absolutely have them. I want to do an episode about that because I just want to piss off
have
Catholics.
Issues with Augustine. Are you saying Augustine? Yeah.
Yes. I'm
just from West Virginia, so I'm like, Augustine.
Well, yeah, that's how I said it. And then,
then you go to Bible college, you're like, Augustine.
Well, that's the thing. You start talking to people who are in that world and you're just like, I don't want to sound dumb. I am dumb, but I don't want to sound it. So I'll just say Augustine. But yeah, so where do we start? Because you watched some of Izzy's videos and you
Mhm.
said he's very different than you. Could you elaborate on some of those differences that you've seen that you may want to know more about, or even if you want to go, hey, I don't know if I understand or agree with this necessarily. Let's hit it and try to find understanding.
Well, yeah, I just did a cursory watching because I'm like, well, I should probably listen to this guy that I'm going to, talk to for an hour plus tonight. First off, I like the content, and I wouldn't say we're very far off on most things. The one particular one that got my attention was, the angels are not, or demons are not fallen angels, which I'm not opposed to that idea. Very different. I'm pretty much not opposed to a whole lot, and I'm always willing to listen. But it was just an interesting video, and I really appreciate how you handled it. And I think you did really good, and I think you have really good stuff to support it.
We've
Oh, thank you,
we've,
man.
we've we've talked about it a little bit here and there. Do we want to just go into that full on, Izzy? Do you want to go
It's
into
your
your
show.
thoughts on that? Like, are
We
you
totally
prepared to do
can.
that?
Well, I have a very nervous dog. If you guys can give me just a moment, because he keeps
No worries.
sniffing my door.
No worries.
Not today, Satan.
I should have named a cat Satan.
Don't
That's
do
what I
that
should have
because Egyptian mythology would not be a good friend to you.
Well, then I'd just name him Seth, like Seth the cat.
He's actually he's a reservation rescue. He was rejected by a couple homes, so he's very tense, very
That's
protective
okay.
for his size.
So here's the basic idea of this, which is the kind of Enochian from the book of Enoch view of demons is not that they are fallen angels, because there's this kind of story that people have grasped onto from, I want to say, just one verse in Revelation, but I can't remember. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong.
It's Revelation 12.
That talks about how I saw a third of the heavens, the stars fell from the heavens, and so people take that and think that, oh, well, all the demons that came down are a third of the angels that were in heaven, and that is the kind of prevailing view of what a demon is it's a fallen angel. It's an angel who rebelled against God and went down with the Satan when he fell from heaven, right?
Mhm.
Whereas the view from Enoch is so that it's a very immersive view, because you have to look at the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. You have to look at the sons of God and have some understanding of who they were, and then you have to know what Nephilim are, because the overall concept is that, and I know I'm trying to do as much groundwork so you can fill in the spaces, Izzy. The idea is that once the Nephilim died in the flood, when they died afterwards, after the conquest of Canaan by the Israelites, which is very fascinating, by the way. Like, I could talk about some of those particular areas. But the idea is that due to them being half spirit creature,
Do you want to go in the bathroom? 'Cause you're kind of
spirit
getting
creation, spirit being, and
calm down.
half human, that when they died, that spiritual essence of theirs continued on, and they're trying to possess and get back into a physical being. Is that the understanding, Izzy?
I heard that last part.
Good.
So I heard the very beginning and the very last part. So let me here. I'll start from here. Calm down. Okay. My dog is so nervous right now. Maybe this conversation. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, have you found that animals respond to demonic possession?
Yeah, they
Or react
respond
to
to
it?
a lot of spiritual things often before people do.
Just figured I'd throw that out there since his dog's all nervous.
Anyway, so the reason that I see a fundamental difference, and if you watch the video, and this is for anyone that is watching this now, if you watch my Fallen Angels Are Not Demons video, it was just showing that there is a fundamental difference between the two. That being that, and I say this in my sequel video as well, which I don't know if you saw it. but it's essentially saying that I don't believe that demons ever had light to begin with, because they were created as an abomination. So they're like the ugliest sucker you could imagine. They're this parasitic thing that it couldn't encase itself as an angel of light, even if it wanted to, because it never had light to begin with. It's the distorted face of man. We're God's imagers, therefore it's the distorted face of God. So theologically speaking, it would make more sense why demons carry around an awful smell to them, why they hunt in packs the way they do, the way they link onto people, and just how overall vile they are. Whereas with the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, taking that into consideration, it helped me when studying that these other divine beings, although they still have their light, it's a false light. It's not a real light, but they can encase themselves like Archangel Michael if they wanted to. They can look just as beautiful because they are that beautiful. They were made with light. They were made with all the characteristics they would have now. They wouldn't lose the characteristics, but their motives have changed, if that makes sense.
So here's a question. So in the Orthodox concept of theosis, or deification in some sense of humanity in relation to being close to God. Look at Moses after he spoke to God on Mount Sinai and brought the law down to the people and all of that. He shone like the sun. Like his skin was like bronze. You see that same imagery in Revelation when you hear talk about Jesus. His face shone like the sun. It was like bronze. This is a common thing. Do you think, and sorry to derail this, we'll get to the point, but do you think that those watchers, those sons of God, have lost, because Moses' shining face went away over time? Do you think that these creatures have lost any of their shininess over time as being away from God and away from his presence, or no?
Maybe a little dim, okay. I would imagine, because I'm trying to remember in the Gospels specifically, it's not part of my notes, but this reminds me that where Jesus says, if your eye is dark, how great is that darkness? But it's referring to, like, it's where darkness and light for the first time in the Gospels, almost like darkness can actually shine the way that it talks about it. And so I think that that's where the false light idea comes from, more or less. Maybe to us, it wouldn't be, a big deal because it's going to look more beautiful than we are.
Right.
So for the most part, no, I think that it's pretty much what it was to begin with. I think that that is going to be part of the Great Deception. I think that it will be very easy to take the American church the way it is, and these beautiful beings that are very, very antichrist will come down and then say all sorts of garbage and then start pulling away a lot of people. I could see that happening very quickly because of this idea that we have, well, they must all look a certain way. And I just don't see that as the case, especially when you look at the aliens. You have those bug-eyed aliens, and then you have the other types of aliens that look a lot more human.
Right. And yeah, that is another thing that we both kind of agree on, is that aliens are watchers. They're demonic. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the greater sense.
That's fascinating.
But overall, I would say demonic in nature. Like, all this is demonic in nature. It's just like, how do they present themselves? Like, and that's where I see there are varying degrees to it because of that discrepancy between a fallen angel and demon. Overall, I say the best thing to do, and this is where me as a paranormal investigator is kind of like a real life detective. They assume everyone's a suspect. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
it's interesting. Like, can I say something about the Moses face glowing thing? Because Paul actually connects it in a very different way to a spiritual warfare. He says that to this day, when the law is read, It puts a veil over people's face, enabling the Satan to deceive and blind the world. So not that the law was bad in his argument, but I kind of take that idea of his veiled face and the glow that he had a little bit different than that. But I mean, you guys have a really cool viewpoint. I've honestly never heard that. So cool beans. I learned me something
that was
today.
cool. I've never heard of that before either.
Oh, cool.
That's either really good or really bad. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it is really interesting because and I'll just go in this a little bit further, because you see, like I said, you see when Moses speaks with God, he comes down the mountain shining. We become more like him in his presence. I mean, like I said, you see in Revelation, when it talks about God, it talks about how his face shone like the full sun. This shining is something that it was passed to Moses temporarily when he was in God's presence. And you see the transfiguration, Moses and Elijah, whether it's a vision or it was a reality that they were there, depending on who you're talking to. Regardless, you look and you see that they are transfigured and in a kind of glorified state. So what are we going to look like? We're going to take over the sons of God's place. We're going to shine.
Amen. And interesting. Another thought that you brought up, Izzy, is that they have like this light, or I would actually call it an anti-light, but I think we're saying the same thing. When I've actually seen certain times when I have actually visibly seen a demon, it's a black that is so dark that it stands out brighter than black, but it's blacker than black, and that makes no sense until you have actually seen such a thing.
Have you seen Vanta Black, the paint?
Yeah, it's like the darkest thing on the earth.
Yeah, so it's like the blackest black. It's black to the point where it essentially absorbs all light around it instead of reflecting it back. And so when you're saying that, I'm visualizing the Vanta Black.
It is kind of like Vanta Black. I mean, because it's like you would take a circle of Vanta Black and put it, in the corner of a dark room, and you would still see that circle, but it's somehow darker than the dark room in which it's in.
So this is a good place to go, I think. Because sometimes I just need the conversation to lead to like the good points I want to talk about. So you both have had between paranormal research and exorcism. By the way, have you had any exorcisms since we last spoke? Scott, had anything like that happen?
No, thank God. I've had some minor ones, but not an actual major one. Thank God. I pray every day that I never have one ever again. Quite honestly. But I've had some close calls.
I definitely want to hear more about that. But let me just ask. So you say you've seen demons. Talk to us about this, about seeing one, because I think we talked about some other things and kind of some smells and I would like to hear both of you talk about your experiences in that realm, if you have them, because mine are very different. They're very much pointed at me rather than other people. And I'm doing the fighting for my, me and Jesus is doing the fighting, but I'm doing the fighting for myself in that moment. But so tell me a story of when you saw a demon, and let's start with Izzy. When you've seen a demon or felt the presence of a demon, what you experienced, Izzy.
Had a couple. Nothing. So the times that I should say the one time, because it was only one time I've ever seen a demon. It was up against a tree. It kind of looked like something on a Demon Night, which is one of my favorite movies. But it had these little yellow eyes, and it was almost like smiling, and it was up against the tree as if it was like camouflaging itself. That was when I was like 19 years old. I fell to my knees immediately because we were seeking this stuff out because we were idiots. But that was the time I actually saw it, but didn't feel it. And the times I didn't see it, I felt it. So if I watch ghost hunting shows, which I like watching because I like to see the technology, I like to see how they capture different evidence. And sometimes you'll actually catch where they believe they saw angels. There was a time when a guy actually was praying in a room, and his tech was still on, and this big, tall figure appeared over him, and it had its hand on his shoulder. And you saw this other thing start to crawl away. It was the weirdest thing. But, yeah, most of the time I can't watch ghost hunting shows because whatever's on the screen makes me very uncomfortable, and I end up having to turn it off. So
it's interesting you bring up the fact, like, whenever you see one, you typically don't feel one, or whenever you feel one, you typically don't see one. But also, anytime I've ever seen one, it's not like I'm full on staring at it like you. It's like a glimpse, like enough to know what's there. It's not like I'm full on looking at like this crazy thing for an extended period of time, but it's enough that I know it's there. But also the feelings that go along with it. Let me delve into the wizarding world of Harry Potter for a minute. But I mean, the idea of the Dementors from Harry Potter, you know how, if you're familiar with that, like they suck all the joy and color and goodness out of anything, kind of like the Vanta Black. It's like that kind of effect. The air goes cold. There could be rotten smells. There could be smoke. There could be wild temperature fluctuations, spikes in electromagnetic frequency. There could be tactile touches, physical apparitions. I mean, the whole gamut runs in, and it depends on each entity and what its, powers are, or what it's supposedly trying to accomplish in that realm. But it's not like I stand in, like I'm staring at a demon all the time. It's when I have seen them, it's been the couple times, it's been a very quick glimpse. But
like
usually it's more the feelings. Say what?
Okay. I said like the corner of your eye type thing.
Yeah. Because I probably, if I stared at it straight on, I'd bolt out of there and be like, see you guys.
This was fun. Nice to meet you. Okay, so the feelings, because I want to know what feelings you feel, because you said that there may be fluctuations in temperature. Oh wait, before I do that, Izzy had mentioned that when it came to demons, there wasn't light. It wasn't the what you would assume an angel is. It didn't come with light. It was always kind of dark, perverse, disgusting, certain smells, things like that. Have you ever run into a demonic presence that was anything but that was light or deceptive in that way? Or was it always the darkness?
Well, I mean, by the time if I get called on the scene, it's the dark. I mean, I think it appears as the light to get a foothold, or to deceive. That's at least my experience. I'm not saying that's always the case, but
That's what I think ghosts are for,
it's just one of those things. Like, I think that's a deception tactic, but anytime I've been around, it's not light and happy. It's until the phase of liberation, in the rite of exorcism, does the mood go positive if it's a legitimate demonic possession, which is extremely rare in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it'd have to be, right? Certainly, right. It's rare.
Yes. Please, God, let it be rare.
So walk me through what it feels like, because we talked about Vanta Black, which I'm so glad I happen to know that paint color, because it's kind of I'm assuming a perfect kind of easily digestible.
It's like a black hole represented in paint.
Yeah, it's wild. But what are the feelings? And I want to know if they're the same that Izzy has picked up.
I get a lot of anxiety. Like, I have generalized anxiety disorder and depression, so that makes me very low functioning on the susceptibility to spiritual attack scale. Even tonight before this broadcast, or anytime I do something like this, I have like a horrendous battle with my anxiety.
That's why I'm here to try to make you as comfortable as possible.
Well, it just makes me happy to look at you and your delightful beard.
Thank you.
But, depression, I mean, numbness, going in and out of almost a disassociation of consciousness if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. There's all kinds of things that can happen. I mean, you're dealing with something that is more powerful than you, but is so much less powerful than Jesus Christ. And that's why you have to go into it with him in the front, right? Because you'll get eaten for lunch, man. Demons will, like when Jesus says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It's not a cutesy little figurative saying, and that's the goal: kill you. And that's what demons tend to want to do, or at least maim or separate or pull you away from God. So, there's a gambit of feelings. I mean, you can go through anger, you go through extreme depression, you can go through, I've heard of people, I haven't experienced this myself, but like, how like the movie Inception or like Doctor Strange, like how everything flips around and reality is just absolute nutso. People can go into those states while investigating or performing an exorcism or anything. I mean, because you're dealing with something that's way beyond and above your intelligence and psychology, and something that's ancient and old and the blackest, foulest evil that has ever existed. I mean, that's what it comes down to. The feelings is like a soul-sucking darkness.
Is there any like tactile feelings as well that are normal? I mean, you mentioned we've all mentioned smell. Is it raw fish? Is it sulfur? What are the smells?
Rotting flesh is my experience. Sulfur has been one. Regular smoke has been one. Maybe if it's a historical site, something that's associated with that, like a coal mine or like a farm may have different odors that accompany it, but it's always not the pleasant ones.
Yes, like animal
it's not like oh, it's a breath of roses. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna throw up inside out. That kind of stuff. But there can be tactile. I mean, I've seen people have stuff scratched into their skin right in front of me. I've seen people lift it up. I've seen people levitate in trance. I've seen bones snapped out of joint, and so it's just one of those things. There's like literally the sky can unfortunately be the limit in the experiences in which you can experience the demonic, in which they can mess with your head.
Right. How about you, Izzy? Is that track? Like what are your experiences in that way? You have them even watching shows.
Yeah. So my experience as far as feeling, which is most of it, because personal encounters with demons has been very minor. It's been, I like to call them level 1 demons, because they do really, really tiny things that are more like on the oppression side.
Yeah.
But as far as what I feel, it's like, first of all, my psychiatrist has me between bipolar and BPD. So I have different types of swings. I have long swings and short swings, and it tends to run in my family. I'm just the first to go to a doctor and say, open me up like a guinea pig. I don't care. I just want to find out, like, from the flesh standpoint, I want to figure out where my head's at. And so when it's almost like my spirit sees what's going on, but I can't. So nothing is manifesting in front of me, but I start feeling like my skin is crawling. Like I'm so uncomfortable, and I don't know why, but I need to get away from it. And I start like feeling like it's icky, like it's stuck on me. Like there's this black goo almost kind of feeling. And it's kind of like when you shake hands with someone that's kind of gross, or they say something that's disgusting and you almost feel like it's on you. It's almost like that. It's like, but it's intensified. And it can even push me into a swing if I'm not careful. My flesh will go straight into another mood swing, and then I'm irritable and all that crap that comes with that. So yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, I think I may have told Scott my story before. I know I told you, Izzy, and I told it on the show, so I won't go too deeply into it before. But a lot of my experiences when it's come to demonic presences and things, there was obviously the paralysis thing, which was winning, even though it's a very sad story. But beyond that, like there was one with my ex-girlfriend, and it's like most of the times I've had something like that happen, it's been by a prompting of the Holy Spirit to start praying for someone. there or not, and some sort of victory through Jesus. That's been my common thing. Is like I haven't had like direct issues with demons near me in that way, but I have had battles in such a way that victory is just always there, and I love that.
Mhm.
Like the fact that I've never had a time there's never been a story I've been like, oh well, Jesus wasn't strong enough to make it go away. I can't tell you that story because it doesn't
Amen.
exist for me.
Amen.
um, so
Yeah,
Sir Tim
can I say
Tunnels,
something to the
yeah,
goo comment that he made?
I missed
I
the
have
goo comment. Goo.
so he talks about how like it feels like a
Oh,
goo that sticks to
right.
you. I have a friend who's also an exorcist out in Las Vegas, and he is
Plenty of demons there.
he is fascinating. He's one of the coolest guys in the world, and I frequent his podcast and know him very well. And his wife got cancer, if I remember right, because the black goo that issued forth from a demonic entity hit her. And she got this extremely rare form of cancer from that. And that's what pulled him
Wow.
back to God. Also, I've also heard from my fellow colleagues, I have not seen this myself, that what people will typically call hellhounds, that manifestation of a demonic, that they crap that black stuff. And it's basically like an acidic, goo that sticks and can literally physically harm you. I don't know if it's like a Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park or whatever. Thank God. I mean, good Lord, I hope I never ever have to deal with the black goo. But I just wanted to throw that in there because I think it feels that way because there's evidence from a lot of people that exists in
Is
a
a portion
physical
of it.
way. But
Well,
most people feel it in a feeling way, not an actual physical.
Right.
well,
That actually. Oh, sorry, Cam.
no, I was just gonna say, and that's super interesting to me because that's the feeling I get. Like Izzy said, when you're around someone who's has a darkness on them, but also after I sin,
Mm-hmm.
I feel that goo.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes, I have that feeling of I need to wash this off of me. I understand it in that sense. But go ahead, Izzy.
Well, it just made me think, when I was deep in the ghost hunting stuff, there was this theory about ectoplasm.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's demon poop.
if most paranormal encounters are actually the demonic rather than ghosts, which I do consider ghosts an anomaly, by God's providence, there is somebody that is there. And there's basically a message being delivered in some way, shape, or form, but it is a very rare thing. And they also can't really interact. The examples we get in the Bible are, if you want to get technical, you basically have two, and they don't do much. They mostly stand there, which is what some of these ghost sightings have been. But if we are to assume the demon to ghost ratio is like 10-1, we'll say. Maybe this whole ectoplasm thing is actually not coming from a ghost, but is actually the goo that we're describing right now is coming from the demonic.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like it tracks.
Yeah.
And also,
Which,
I
by the
should
way,
mention that same friend that his wife got that he got in an investigation, he got spit on when he stuck his head up in an attic pursuing the entity, and he actually died. Died. And the paramedics brought him back to life. He went into full like cardiac arrest.
Wow.
So I thank God I've never had an exorcism like that, and I pray to God I never will. But and I mean, holy smokes, right? Like,
yeah.
yikes.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that Sir Tim, or my good buddy Sir Tim Tunnel said on here is, you mentioned generalized anxiety, depression. You mentioned borderline and bipolar. And one of the things that's hard when you have these conversations is a lot of people will be like, "Oh, well, I'm not going to listen to them anymore. They just told me that they're crazy. They have mental illnesses. I shouldn't listen to them." By the
Yeah.
way, here's a fun thing. If you go to to a psychiatrist because you have anxiety based on like legitimately just a hard freaking life at the moment, and you're trying to figure out how you can kind of deal with these feelings, they will put you on 7 drugs and make you a crazy person. Just
Yes.
FYI, just so you know.
My
so
psychiatrist is awesome. She always refers to me as the only patient she has that's not crazy. So I mean, I have medical proof that I am not crazy, at least in that way.
Well, what's funny is I went to, like I said, that's my story. I went to a psychiatrist. I was like, I'll try this out because I was having some anxiety. Like I had I had a lot of hard stuff going on, and when money would come up, I would have a panic. I'd go into a panic, and it was because of very real issues that were in front of me. And I was like, maybe I'll talk to him, be able to work through some coping mechanisms to deal with this because I have to deal with this sort of thing in life. And the dude put me on sertraline, which is Zoloft for depression. I didn't say that I had. And then he
it's also
put
an
me on,
anti-anxiety.
right. And so, yeah, he marked me as a depressive. And then so that was for that. And then he gave me some other stuff, Boost Par or something for anxiety. Yeah. And then he was like, and you're definitely ADHD. And so here's some Vyvanse. And so I was on these drugs. I lost my damn.
It seems like counterintuitive.
I lost my mind for like a month there, guys. Like I did stupid things and I had to get off of this stuff. And I went to my doctor, and then I talked to another psychiatrist who actually had like the doctor part rather than just like a nurse practitioner or whatever. And they were like, okay, so your anxiety is caused by what's going on in your life. We're going to have to work on some coping mechanisms that you can deal with. And they go, the rest of it, I don't see any evidence for it whatsoever. And I was like, thank you. Because I'm like, this guy put me on this stuff, and I'm like, this is driving me insane. I felt more crazy than I did ever. And now I'm off of all of it, and I'm like, I mean, yeah, life's kind of hard sometimes, but I'm okay now. Much better. Right. But all of that to say, why should anyone trust us since we've had these experiences with mental health issues? Is mental illness a sensitivity for the supernatural or spiritual things? Like what is how many like if you talked to someone who is a pure materialist and in the atheist sort of way, they would say that the people who had demons and had demons exorcised from them in the Bible were schizophrenics. And they just didn't know what to call it at that point. It was a brain malfunction, not a spiritual thing. What do you think is the tie there? Do you think that like how do we square this circle? How do we make it so that people aren't like, oh well, yeah, he has anxiety, so obviously he's got mental problems, so we can't trust him. What do we do there?
Well, this is where the deliverance side of the Christian world. I'm going to talk about inner healing for a moment, and hopefully not sound paganistic at all when talking about it, because the pagans
talking about Harry Potter, so go ahead.
They have taken inner healing and made it their own thing. But the truth is, pretty much, it's safe to say for the most part, like maybe 99% of the time even, that mental illness tends to go back to childhood, or possibly you were born with it, or both. I believe it was both for me. I think it ran in my family. And I think some of it's a nurture versus nature thing. And when you see these people, Jesus says, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to these. And when you see these people go up to a psychologist, especially people with BPD, and I'm subject to this, it's happened to me. It actually happened to me recently, where the inner child will come out. And it's not that it's the inner child, it's that it's a damaged part of somebody that comes forward and straight up manifests as if it were a demon, but it's not a demon. Yeah, that's great. Very true.
Absolutely. And also, I think also looking at it theologically, because I think you make a fantastic point. Um, none of the gospel writers, I mean, especially you look at Luke, right? He's a physician.
Yeah.
He is very concise in his Greek wording in these demonic episodes between illness and demonic possession or affliction or suffering. So I think that God is not using perfect people because there are none. And I think, I think after the past 3 years, I would say 1 in every 3 Americans has some sort of what would qualify as a mental illness.
Well, yeah,
You
and
know, it,
even if they don't, they're going to be told that they do.
right. But I mean, I
I mean,
think most
I
of
don't
us are
want to go
very
too
high
conspiracy.
functioning.
I would say I
But I
don't want to go
think,
too conspiracy, but there
right.
is
Well, I
there's
mean,
some
big
stuff at
pharma,
play.
But
Yeah, there's some
we
stuff at
can't
play.
we can't because the Apostle Paul never demythologized the New Testament. He dealt with demons. He cast them out. There wasn't like this was some psychiatric illness. And Jesus himself, when speaking about it, is very plain in the difference between illnesses and demonic possession and or oppression. So I think that the just the witness of the New Testament itself and the early church fathers thereafter, this wasn't just some scientific thing, plus the evidence of anthropological and, evidence that every culture and religion has this idea of,
Yeah.
bad juju or demons or jinn, like in Islam, whatever you want to call it. So I think there is a differentiation, but mental illness is not a disqualifier, but it often runs in tandem to hide the demonic. They know that, and they can often use that to their advantage because they are way smarter than people are. They're the best
Well, they've
psychologists,
also
Yeah.
right. Well, I mean, it's so funny because you'll talk to people. So and we're at like 57 minutes, so we'll shift over into the extended episode in probably the next 5 minutes. But one of the things that I see every now and then, and one of the deceptions that I see is reincarnation in past lives, right? Because you have this kid, he knew that he used to be this man named Rodney who lived 1,000 miles away, and it was a black man, and he knew all of this stuff. This little white boy knew everything, and so they finally found where he lived, and he walked into the house, and he told the wife things about her dead husband that no one else knew, especially not this 7-year-old child or whatever. And so that's how I knew there were past lives, and that this, and it's like, you don't think that a demon could have been around long enough to have details on Rodney and to say them to this child? Like,
right?
that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. If you're trying to say, I know that there are past lives and it's not demon stuff because of that, makes no sense. They've been
Well,
around for
also
thousands of years.
they have nothing but time compared to us. I mean, their time is short. The day is
Yeah.
coming when their time is up. But compared to humans 70, 80, 90, 100 years, they have nothing but time. And compared to us, so
Right.
they're very patient. Um, and so, yeah, they can absolutely know something and feed it down 7 generations later to make it distort. And also couple that with a modern American evangelical view that often, I hate to say it, but denies resurrection and instead describes it rather as a form of reincarnation because of
Yeah.
terrible biblical
Or
teaching.
decarnation, really.
Yeah, because
Mm.
resurrection is literally the reversal of death, not the soul transferring to another body
Yeah,
or
we're not
state of matter.
right, because we're not
It's
ghosts
only
in the shell.
resurrection if you were dead and then you're alive again. Like
Right.
you were definitely dead like Jesus, but now he's alive, right? That's resurrection. That's not reincarnation. But so many, I think, in the modern church and in the Western world have equated it with this feel good, like my soul is just, I'm going to be like the spiritual ethereal being that floats through different bodies, and
Well, and that's the problem. And that's Jessica tweeted the other day something about, would the my brain goes to Nephilim, but would the Neanderthals or whoever, Cro-Magnon, whatever, have souls? And I'm like, in biblically, yes, because that's the word nephesh, which means throat, which both animals and humans had in the creation story, except for when the King James Version came around, they used the word soul, which is an incredibly unhelpful term because you take that word soul and you go, where'd this come from? And you go, oh, Plato, and the idea of the ghost in the shell. Whereas we're whole beings, not two weird parts that are simultaneously living. We're whole beings. Like, there's a problem. There's a problem here when it comes to soul and the way people see things. And like, I maybe I'll put it in the notes, but I'll put a Bible Project video about the words about soul and nefesh in the description, because it's like
That's exactly what I
you're not
thought
using
of.
that word right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that we have to reorientate we have to reorient ourselves toward the Bible, towards what is revealed to us rather than what we get from culture,
Right.
which
And
is
it's like
very
back to
weird.
Augustine, how heavily influenced was he by Plato and all of that? I mean, good Lord, the guy's theology was basically rewriting and baptizing Plato's,
Gnosticism.
and Gnosticism stuff and this dualism. I mean, the guy had some great ideas. His story's great, but theologically, my goodness, what a train wreck. But we're people, right? People be people, and then Satan be messing that up.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to talk more. We've hit an hour. So I'm gonna wrap up the main show. Anyone who's listening now and wants to catch the extended episode, you can go to patreon.com/the mad ones and sign up, or to rockfin.com/the mad ones and sign up there. And you can continue this episode, and I will bring in any comment I missed in here, anything like that. I'll bring in, and we'll be able to discuss on screen with your interaction. But before we do that, I do want to ask you the big question, Scott, since it's been a year, almost a year and a half. Well, no, not almost a year and a half, a year and 2 months since we last spoke. What is, because you know me, this show's about hope. We want to share hope with people. We want to share, give people a little bit of something to grab onto and to motivate themselves to carry on. And so I like to share little silver linings. So what's something right now that could be directly in your life? It could be local, global, whatever, that gives you hope and the motivation to carry on.
Yeah, this actually happened last night, and I was kind of stupefied in my when I was teaching our congregation's Bible study. We're watching this series called One at a Time, and it's how Jesus kind of, at certain points, kind of went away from the crowd to the specific individual, right? And so I have this friend who I went to Bible college with, and he fell away, and the church was really brutal to him, and there was some serious religious trauma. He became a Muslim cleric, then he went to paganism, now he's atheist, then he went back to Catholicism, now he's atheist. He was homeless, he's addicted to all these things. And in my mind's eye, last night I was sitting there, and my friend came into my brain, and he has just moved to Columbus, which is like 90 miles north of me. So closer than like 5 hours. And literally in my head, I can't say it was an audible voice, except that's the best way to describe it, was go get my sheep.
Yeah.
And I want people to know, no matter what, even if you are not like believing in God, even if you're in the deepest pits of despair or you are stuck, God is actively like looking for you. God is trying to bring you home. God is trying to get your attention. And that gives me hope, because working for a church, I get to see a lot of the crud in people's lives and the terrible things people do. And I mean, we see that anyway, but God is actively like still working. He hasn't abandoned us. He's still saving the world through Jesus Christ, one person at a time. And that's what hope your listeners will take away from that more than anything.
Right. Well, that's what's so cool is, a lot of times what I call it is, I understand what you're talking about, because I have experienced what I call the inaudible but unmistakable voice of God. That's what I call it. That's a way for me to put it. I've had that happen a lot, but what's great about what you just said was it's what the affirmation Jesus gave to Peter after the resurrection, because Peter, I mean, think about, I'll do this and then I'll do the rest of it and we'll go in the extra show. But Peter, upon the crucifixion of Jesus, he's sitting outside with the others as they're waiting through this trial, as they're waiting to get to the point where Jesus will be crucified, right? And Jesus tells him in advance, before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And so you have to think about how Peter 3 times that night denied Jesus, denied that he knew him, denied that he was a disciple, denied the Lord. And then he heard a rooster crow. And you have to think of Pavlov and his dogs, right? Where you'd ring the bell and you'd be conditioned. And you have to think that ever since that day when Peter denied Jesus 3 times, that every time he heard a rooster crow, he thought about his denial of Jesus. And you have to imagine the pain that was there, especially when Jesus comes back and he's standing in front of you. And you're the guy who said you're the son of God, you're Messiah. And you have to hear a rooster crow and go, I denied him. I let him die. And then Jesus it's on the beach. Jesus has made breakfast for them, right? And he goes up to Peter and Peter asks him, what can I do? And this is a paraphrase, so I'm sorry. Just read it later, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But Jesus says, what am I to do? And Jesus says, if you love me, feed my sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Does he say it once? No. He says it 3 times. And if you look at that, the fact that it's the morning, it's breakfast time, that rooster's about to crow. And you hear Jesus say it 3 times and deprogram, undo the denials of Peter for him in that moment. And that's what Jesus said to you. Go get my sheep. If you love me, feed my sheep. I'm sorry. There's something so beautiful about that parallelism between his failure and what Jesus did to bring him back into the fold and make him not just a sheep, but a shepherd who feeds the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of beautiful. So with that, thank you guys for coming on. I'm excited to talk to you more in the extended episode, which, like I said, get on that, patreon.com/themadOnes, rockfin.com/themadOnes. Do it. Let's do this thing. But if you want to follow Scott on Twitter, he's at Scott Johnson 015. I think that's still right. And if you want
I
to
don't
follow
really
me
ever use Twitter, but that's right. Yeah.
right. I just, where else would you want them to find you? Is there another?
Facebook. You just
Okay.
search Scott Johnson in Middletown, Ohio on Facebook.
And then Izzy is at Izzy-centric everywhere. You
Pretty
can
much,
find
yeah.
You can find him on YouTube. You can find him on TikTok, Instagram, anywhere else. Twitter. Yeah, you're on Twitter as well at Izzy-centric.
Yep.
So you can find him there. Is there anything else you want to share with the class before we go into the after?
Other than my merch is currently 20% off.
Ooh.
And it's part of my New Year's sale to get people rolling in and taking a look at my stuff. Izzycentric.com. You'll see Izzy's merch at the top. Take a look, see if you. I got stuff like this. I got less controversial stuff. I got a new series of shirts and backpacks and stuff called Spooky Tacos, where it's got little aliens next to tacos being abducted, because who doesn't love tacos?
It's true.
And so, yeah, go check it out.
Awesome. Okay, so that's all for that. And I'll tell the rest of you my roll call of crap, and then we'll go. So what's coming up next week? We're going to have Warren McGrew, aka Idol Killer, on to talk about how he was once Calvinist and is no longer, because you don't hear a lot of those stories, and I think that's interesting to talk about. And then after that, we're going to have Naomi Wright from Be Emboldened on. Her father started his own polygamous cult that she grew up in. And we're going to talk about that and how she got away and what it's like to be a cult leader's daughter. For the rest of the things, like I said, patreon.com/themad-ones. You can support me directly there. You can get the extended episodes. If you want a t-shirt or a mug, I don't have anything on sale right now. I try to keep things at a good price, but I'm about to switch everything over. So, do it now before I pull the whole site down and then redo it, which is wearethemad-ones.com/store. You can follow me on Twitter at hamcarless, because Elon will not give me my name back yet, and I'm not happy about that whatsoever.
You got to pay him $8, bro.
Dude, I'm paying him $8 for Ham Carlos. But if you're listening and you'd rather watch, don't know why you'd want to do that, but I'd appreciate it if you do. YouTube.com/themad-ones. We're also on Rockfin. I think we are on Rumble. That's an automatic upload after these are done. And then if you'd rather not see my face or ever look at Scott ever again, you can go to any podcatcher or wearethemad-ones.com, and all of those episodes are there for download and for listen right there. That's it. We're about to get into the after show. So dear people of whom watch this show, and I love very dearly, as always, you have a chance to be a light in the world. So go light it up.